Welcome back, everybody, to episode number 6 of the Point After Podcast. We missed last week, had some things going on out of town for majority of the week, but we try to get this one out as soon as possible, so you'll be seeing this on Tuesday. We're recording this on Monday night, so that hopefully we can get another episode and a couple more videos out to you guys this week. Matthew, how's it going, man?
Doing good, brother. Seems like it's been a while. Really hadn't, but getting all this information together. Seems like forever since we've recorded an episode. So glad to be back.
Yeah, it's been a long week. We couldn't connect last week with stuff we had going on. So it feels longer than it actually has been. A lot's happened since the last time we talked.
Yep.
But we're going into it. So one of the things, we'll start with this past weekend. If you want to bring up something from week 6 while we're here, since we didn't get to cover it, we can touch on that as well. But the big topic of conversation coming out of week number 7 is the top 5 matchup that happened where Nick Saban, who wasn't even supposed to be on the field technically, is able to test negative 3 days in a row, comes back and sees Alabama handily beat Georgia in the second half. What did you think about that game, and what were some of the takeaways that you had from it?
I think the biggest thing for me that I noticed was that I think it was the third quarter, maybe I had saw a stat where Alabama controlled the time possession for, I think, 11 out of 15 minutes in the quarter. And, for a game like this, especially, 2 weeks ago, how the defense for Alabama came, you would think in a game like this that would make sense to try to control the ball more. And, that they offensively, I think we looked about as good as we could. Defensively, I still think there's some work to be made. The second half was a huge upside going into this week. But, the main thing for me, though, would be time of possession. I think that's important in a game like this when you have two teams that could well put up 30-plus points, 40-plus points a game. So.
Yeah, coming into the season, I wasn't really that high on Georgia. I didn't think they would be as good as they were the past couple of years. But the way they played in the first half was kind of surprising. It's kind of the way I think we both expected that game to go all 4 quarters. Alabama, I was texting you about this throughout the game. The defense just hasn't looked as good. Dylan Moses hasn't looked like he's back to his full self. I was expecting Alabama to kind of play ball control like we did with Derrick Henry and Eddie Lacy back in 2012, and just see a bunch of Alabama control the ball, not let Georgia have it, force one turnover, and win the game by 10. But the second half saw an offensive explosion. 2 second half interceptions by the defense?
Yes.
Yeah, so
3 total.
Yeah, defense balled out. They look really good in the second half. I think if you carry that over to Tennessee, we'll probably win by 2 or 3 scores as well. So I don't think this weekend's matchup with Tennessee is going to be that great, but I think if the defense keeps playing like that, then we should be all right for the rest of the year.
Yeah, it'll definitely be a good game for the defense to, after last week, seemed like we figured a lot of things out. I think this game this week is, Tennessee's coming off a horrible performance last week, so I think they're going to give it their best. They usually do, for the most part, against Alabama. I think that's a perfect matchup for our defense to kind of work out the few remaining kinks that we have.
Yeah, defense is still relatively young. I think I touched on this like the first episode around when we played Missouri or prior to the Missouri game. There's not a single senior on defense. I think Moses is listed as a junior, and this may be because of the whole eligibility thing where everyone gets an extra year, like this year don't count. But even then, you're still looking at only 2 seniors on defense, and 1 didn't play all last season. I think Surtain would be the other one. So this is still relatively young defense. The secondary, I believe, is all new, except for Surtain. And then we have a couple key players who played last year that's had a couple injuries. Like you said, I think this is a good week for the defense to work out stuff. Tennessee's offense isn't really explosive. They did a good job running the ball earlier in the season against, I believe it was South Carolina, where they had 2 backs go over 100. So South Carolina don't look bad either. So I mean, Tennessee's not one of those teams that I think Alabama needs to worry about, but I think it's a team that if we take it easy and slack off, that they could definitely make it closer than it should be.
I agree.
And we'll get into the stats a little bit. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Mac Jones set a record um, on Saturday for 400-yard games in a row.
Uh, 3, I think.
I know it's three for sure. I couldn't remember if it was the fourth one. Um,
I think 2. I think when he had 2, it was the first person, or he tied 2, I think, for consecutive games, and then the third game is actually what this past week.
what set it over? Yeah,
Yeah, I believe it's 3.
yeah. So he's playing out of his mind. We're conducting the Mac Jones for Heisman train. Something I saw today, thanks to PFF, he is still the highest graded quarterback in college football. That's over Trevor Lawrence, over Trey Lance, all these guys that they have getting drafted, high first round
Yeah,
in the draft. He's putting up a 94 grade. I've got it right here. 94.3 grade, which is almost 2 points better than Trevor Lawrence. Um, and I think that says something because I saw another stat that said, you compared Tua and Mac's stats, and Mac's average defense that he's going up against is like ranked 48th in the country, where Tua is putting up these numbers going up against like 73,
yeah,
like 73 overall defense. So Mac is definitely playing really good. Mechie's doing well. Jalen Waddle's unreal. Devontae Smith, sleeper. I'll let you share your opinion on Devontae Smith in a minute, but I think just top to bottom, this Alabama offense could be probably the best we've seen. You could make the argument forever. I think when you get Ruggs and Damian Harris and Josh Jacobs and Tua, and that core, a lot of people say that's better talent wise, but I think just performance wise, this year has been probably the best we've seen, at least in the Nick Saban era.
yeah. I agree. And one thing, for me, Tua, all the hype was around Tua, so he got a lot more of, I guess you could say, the media attention, social media attention. But for me, Mac Jones, correct me if I'm wrong here, I think he's just an overall better decision maker than Tua was. I
Yeah,
think
I
that
agree with that.
reflects on, he had an interception against Georgia on Saturday, but that was a tipped pass. Um, you can look at that how you want to, but for me, Mac Jones is just at the top of his game when it comes to decision making. I think that's what set him apart from the rest of the conference and the rest of the nation.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, if I'm not mistaken, Mac Jones has one turnover-worthy throw all season, and it was against Texas A&M. It was against Ole Miss on an out route, like a 15, 20-yard out route that should have been picked. So his two interceptions haven't even been labeled as turnover-worthy throws.
Yeah.
Um, so I've got another stat wrote down that I'm gonna share. I'll share that later on in the episode though. But yeah, I think Mac Jones, he was a 3-star coming out of high school. I believe Tua was for sure a 5-star. Jalen might have been a 5-star, for sure a 4 probably. Um, so he was kind of covered up and underrated in that class. But I think he's definitely showing that, should Tua and Jalen have not shown up, I think he could have potentially been a 4-year starter for Alabama,
Right.
given who else was in the class and who else was there at the time. But I mean, you go from A.J. McCarron to Jake Coker, Greg McElroy. I think Mac Jones fits into those 4 or those other 3, but he would be the better quarterback of the 4.
Yeah, and one thing too is his success is a direct reflection off of how great and how greatly led the offensive line is. I think that's playing a big part in our rushing and passing success, if not the most part in it. Because if you look at it in terms of compared to last year and this year, and pass rush, Mac Jones has seen, I think, out of the first 4 games this year and the first 4 games last year for Tua, he has seen a 30% decrease in pass rush, and that's a testament to the blocking and the guys up front. So I think that's a big thing moving forward. And I, Gage, it's hard. It's hard not to say that he's not the Heisman front runner right now. I could see him not being, but he's definitely got to be in the conversation.
Yeah, I think a lot of people throw Trevor Lawrence as the front runner just because of who he is. Yes, he's putting up impressive stats, but I mean, like you're not playing the best of teams here. You're playing Citadel and Georgia Tech, who is struggling. Georgia Tech has a really good coach. They're just gonna have to turn it around, or he's still
Mm-hmm.
in the process of turning that program around. So, I mean, in my opinion, Mac Jones is the best quarterback in college football right now in terms of production value and what you're getting from a quarterback. He may not be like if you had to develop a draft board, I wouldn't say I'd throw him in the number one pick up there with Trevor Lawrence, but I would
Yeah.
say in terms of who is playing best this season, I think Mac Jones takes the cake. He has 1,500 yards passing, 12 touchdowns, 2 interceptions that were both tip balls. He's only been sacked 5 times, so that goes with what you were saying with the pass rush. And I think it's not only the offensive line. I think Miller Forrestall is doing a great job helping with
Yeah.
that as well. I pulled up the stats, and when you go receiving, there's only 3 wide receivers that have a catch. Miller Forrestall has 8 catches, and then 3 other people have a catch, and they're all running backs. So it's all check downs with the running backs. They total for 10, and then Waddle, Smith, and Mechie have quick math here. We're looking like 70 catches total, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Forrestall has 8. So it's not even like you haven't even seen the full depth of Alabama yet, because you can't tell me like they don't have anybody besides those 3 that can play wide receiver.
Right.
They as many recruits as they bring in, they're loaded, and you haven't even seen the full depth of this offense yet. So that
Yeah.
that stands out a lot to me. But yeah, I do think this offensive line is a lot of the reason that Alabama's had this success on offense so far this season.
Hey, and dare I say it? I think one of the most impressive things I'm taking away as an Alabama fan from Saturday night is the field goal going into the half. That's something we don't get to see a lot of, and I will say Will Reichard, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name, has been on a tear, especially for an Alabama kicker.
Oh yeah, I think last week we were talking about how we've been spoiled as Alabama fans, um, and then now it's like you add a kicker into the mix, something we've never had in our 22, 23 years of being alive here. Alabama's never had a kicker, and now that we have one, um, don't know how to act. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
I'm,
but
I'm about as excited as that as I am an 80-yard touchdown pass.
oh yeah, absolutely. I think you didn't get to see what happened there at the end of the half. Were you able to like watch video of it or find out what truly
Yeah,
happened?
I saw the final drive, and everything leading up to that, but I didn't actually watch it live. But I got to see the highlights of it.
Gotcha. Well, we'll get off Alabama a little bit and head over to the other part of the state with the Auburn Tigers, who I would say struggling is an understatement.
Yeah,
Not performing well at all. They do have a new play caller, a new offensive system. I do think that's some of the growing pains, because it ain't like they had cakewalks to start the season. They didn't have a non-conference game. They didn't have that FCS team or group of 5 school that you normally play in the first 2 weeks. I think their first week game of the year was in North Carolina or Oregon. Um, so you don't have that game, and then you start off with Kentucky, who's arguably a top 25 team, Georgia, who's a top 5 team in the country, Arkansas, who's on the turnaround, and South Carolina, who's a decent team. So having those growing pains, and I think that's the main reason why you saw Bo Nix get into it with Chad Morris and Seth Williams, I think, on the sideline on Saturday, is just they're
yeah,
still getting used to it, still working out kinks. I think at one point he was mad at Seth for running like a different route, and that kind of comes back to just identifying coverage, like, hey, if it's cover 2, you're running this, cover 3, you're running that, miscommunication, and then it just kind of the thread of taking a loss to South Carolina kind of boiled over and caused a lot of tension.
yeah. And for me, correct me if I'm wrong here. The running back at Auburn, Tank Bigsby, last week he only had 16 carries, over 100 yards and a touchdown, whereas Bo Nix threw the ball 47 times and had 3 interceptions versus 1 touchdown. You know, has Auburn utilized Tank Bigsby like in the recent first 4 games like they should? I mean, from watching the game Saturday, it looked like this guy deserves 20, 22, 23 carries a game.
Yeah, I mean, I just pulled up the Arkansas stats, and he ran for 20 and 146, and then 16 and over 100 last Saturday against South Carolina. So I think that could be a part of it. They're probably trying to lean too much on Bo Nix. Bo Nix is potentially trying to make too much happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I would definitely not be surprised at all to see them lean more on Tank Bigsby. He's a hell of a running back, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So you definitely need to lean on that as much as possible. And at the same time, they play Ole Miss on Saturday, then they have LSU and Mississippi State after that, and that's really the only 3 games. LSU, Mississippi State, and Tennessee after that, and those are probably the 4 games. Like if you're going to win, you're going to have to win those 4 because you finish the season with Alabama and Texas A&M, and
Right.
you're looking at a 4-4 season for Auburn or 5-5, which isn't great. I mean that's like on par with like Gus Malzahn is used to, and what Auburn fans are used to is a decent season with 3 SEC losses and your other 3 wins come from non-conference. So I mean, I think the Gus bus is out of gas, man. I don't think Gus Malzahn is going to be there another year. It came down to he's only getting these extensions because he picks up that 1 win over Alabama every 4 years.
Right. Well, and I haven't been impressed, let me say, with Bo Nix so far this year, but we know he is capable of winning big games. He did it last year as a freshman. Game-winning drive against Oregon to open the season. We saw what he did against Alabama. But, for me, I think I'm with you. I think Gus is 1 or 2 losses away from a team, not a team like Texas A&M or Alabama, but these teams like South Carolina and Arkansas that they barely got by. 1 or 2 of those losses, I think we see Gus packing his bags out of Auburn.
Yeah, I do too. I think especially if they lose to possibly Mississippi State and Mike Leach for the underwhelming performance that KJ Costello has had all season, which I think they swapped quarterbacks on Saturday, like late in the second half, so that could be a storyline that we touch on later on in the season. But yeah, I think just 1 loss, especially a bad loss to Tennessee, Mississippi State, then you're going to see Gus Malzahn out, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah, to touch on Bo Nix, I mean, he hasn't performed well, but this is the SEC's freshman of the year last year, or offensive freshman of the year, who, like you said, he beat Oregon, he beat Alabama, he had a couple decent wins, or a couple good wins rather, and then you change offensive coordinators, change play callers, you're in a brand new system. It's not like this is a guy that was there, you're running the same stuff. You're learning a brand new system with a shortened camp, a camp that's not like you normally get where you get in the film room and work together. I'm sure they probably had to do Zoom meetings at some point during camp. Then you get an offensive lineman who has only played 4 games together as a whole. 3 of the offensive linemen had never started in their life. 1 was a 1-year starter and 1 was a grad transfer. So just collectively, that whole offense is, built for disaster, and I think you're seeing that to start this year.
Yeah.
I don't know where you go from here from Auburn because it's not going to get any easier. You're going to have a 2 or 3 week window where it's going to drop off a little bit, but then again, you're going to be under so much pressure to perform that you could easily slip up and lose one of those games too. Because Mississippi State, they're going to put up yards, they're going to put up points eventually once they figure it out. And if they find their quarterback and Costello's not it, then I could see Mississippi State pulling off an upset. LSU, we didn't get to see them last week, so it's still kind of hard to tell what we're getting with that. Tennessee and Auburn is going to be a good game. And then A&M and Auburn, I feel like that's going to be another game that could go either way. It just kind of depends on which teams show up for both sides. So.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how the season plays out for Auburn. But we'll swap conferences here, get out of the state of Alabama and go up to North Carolina, who was subpar at best against Florida State on Saturday. Florida State did not look great against Jacksonville State. They kind of only won that one, in my opinion, because Jacksonville State just ran out of gas, man. You know, being the first game of the year, you're always going to have those growing pains for both teams. But Florida State's first game of the year was 3 weeks prior. So they were kind of conditioned for it and in better shape. Mike Norvell, I believe he was sick with COVID and missed a game or two.
Mm-hmm.
So he was able to get back. And, you know, realistically, if North Carolina scores a field goal or another touchdown in the first half, then they win that game. I think they shut them out 21-0 in the second half. But then nonetheless, I mean, you look at Florida State, they have a loss to Georgia Tech, who just lost by 60-something to Clemson, lost by 42 to Miami, and then lost by 16 to Notre Dame.
Yes.
So Florida State's not that great of a team. So what do you think this means for North Carolina? Where do they go from here? Was it a fluke game, or was it something that they actually need to be worried about?
Yeah, I'm going to play the fluke card. The second half, they played really well the second half offensively or defensively, shutting them out and putting up 21 points is, be that as it may, that's really good as well. But the second quarter, letting Florida State score 24 points, that's something I feel like can make anybody lose a football game. I'm still high on the Sam Howell train. He only had one interception the other day, threw for almost 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. But I think, we were going to talk about this the other day, or we had made text about it. North Carolina, I think, has, top 2, top 3 running back duos in the nation. Both of those guys can carry the rock for, I think 3 weeks ago, they both had over 60, 70 yards apiece. This week, or this past week, they had one guy over 100 yards. Maybe we're throwing the ball a little too much. I mean, I don't know. When you got running backs like that, you want to use them as much as you can. If you ask me. But yeah, I'm gonna play the fluke card. I think they bounce back from this. I'd like to see North Carolina win out. I think they can. But giving up 24 points in a quarter to a team that's not really good is not going to help the case any.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, it was last week that we were going to touch on the duo in the backfield for North Carolina, Javonte Williams and Carter. They really good performance the week prior against Virginia Tech, where you saw an explosion in the first half from North Carolina. And then this past Saturday against Florida State, it was an explosion in the second half. So, yeah, I agree with you. I do think it was more of a fluke for Mac Brown and the Tar Heels. I think they just have to put it together. I think,
yeah.
I mean, like I said, they played good in the first half against Virginia Tech, played decent in the second half, and then it was the complete opposite against Florida State. You don't do anything in the first half. You find yourself down 31-7 at halftime. Score 21 unanswered in the second half, and ultimately you lose by 3. You play NC State this week, who I think they win that one very easily. NC State just lost their quarterback to a broken fibula, something, leg, out, 8 weeks the rest of the year. That one's going to go in their favor. Virginia's not good. Duke's not good. Wake Forest is not good. You play Notre Dame, who I think they look legit. They passed the eye test, but it's Notre Dame. They're going to lose at some point. And then you play Miami to finish the year. And I think if you can turn it around and finish strong, depending on how Notre Dame finishes the season, you could find yourself in that ACC championship game against Clemson.
Yeah. I think Notre Dame is definitely the game, for me as well. I think they're going to handle Miami. I think it's going to be another high-scoring game, but definitely got to win out. Wake Forest is a team, not to sleep on. Rondell Moore, receiver, got playmakers. But the Notre Dame game for me, that's something they got to keep an eye on. They have to win every game from here on out. But when you win those games, you got to keep in mind the Notre Dame game could put us back in the conversation.
Yeah, I just pulled up Notre Dame's schedule. They have Clemson and North Carolina to finish the year. Other than that, I don't see. Which they just beat Louisville by 5. That may have been 2 weeks ago. But nonetheless, they play Pittsburgh, Georgia Tech, Boston College, Syracuse, and Wake Forest. So they're looking forward to Clemson, which is why I could see them having a slip-up game against maybe Pittsburgh this weekend and losing that one. But if they're not careful, then North Carolina, they lose to Clemson. I'm pretty sure if they lose to Clemson, they could still make the ACC championship game. But then you're eyeing that Clemson versus North Carolina game where whoever wins that, or sorry, Notre Dame, North Carolina, whoever wins that one will ultimately get Clemson in the ACC championship. So
Yeah.
it could go either way. It just depends on if North Carolina can put things together. I could see them making a run at the ACC championship. Should they beat Clemson somehow, maybe they're number 4 seed to get into the playoffs. I think depending on how the season plays out in the ACC and SEC, you're looking at either the SEC runner-up or the ACC runner-up taking that number 4 spot. But you could also make a case for, and we'll touch on this later when we talk about playoffs. You could also make a case for if you have a 2-loss team in either conference that's the runner-up. Oklahoma State goes undefeated, they slide in there. BYU maybe somehow makes a case to make it in. I think if BYU plays how they did against Houston, not going to be in. But I think if they can win the rest of their games handily and Zach Wilson keeps playing the way he is, BYU is definitely in the conversation for the playoffs.
Yeah.
But let's see. Anything else you want to touch on in the ACC? I don't.
Well, I was just going to say this. I saw this stat right here, and I was going to share it. One reason I think North Carolina is going to remain successful, and why I'm going to still add on that this Florida State game was a fluke. In every single game this year, North Carolina has controlled the time of possession, and they've won the first down ratio, and with the exception of last week, they've won the turnover ratio. So, those things right there, that says a lot about North Carolina and Mac Brown. He's got the team where they need to be. They just got to finish ball games, and they're one strong quarter away from being 5-0 right now, or 4-0.
Yeah, and they have a win over a ranked opponent. If they win this week, it'll be another ranked opponent. If they win out or one loss out, they'll still have 3 wins over ranked opponents, depending on how the final rankings play. But you got to keep in mind, this is only Matt Brown's second year there. Sam Howell, This is his second season there. So this is still a program that's on the verge of potentially being a contender for the ACC year in and year out. And I think it's kind of the same situation with the SEC, where you have Alabama, Tier 1 team, Georgia, Tier 1 team, and then you have Florida, who's not Tier 1 yet, but they're almost there. And then it's kind of 4 through 10, it's all even. Well, in the ACC, you have Clemson, who's Tier 1, then you have like Miami. This year you have Notre Dame, and then you have North Carolina, who's not Tier 1, but I wouldn't classify them with the rest. And then the ACC is just all the rest of the teams on out are just kind of all on an even playing field.
Yeah, that's funny. I was about to say the same thing. North Carolina, to me, is just one of those teams that's right outside the bubble of a Tier 1 team. I consider them Tier 2 with, Oregon, like you said, Florida, Penn State, teams like that always compete, but they just can't get over the iceberg right there at the end. But I believe in Mac Brown. Everybody has seen what he's done in his career, so they got a good coach. They got the right coach. They're in a great conference to be successful. And hey, their schedule, that's a perfect resume. Win out ACC championship, win that. I think they're in. But got to get the small things done first.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I'm trying to find. Let's see. So they go from 5 and 18 in 2017 and 2018. You hire Mac Brown, you immediately go to 7 and 6, and then you're 3 and 1, one score away from being 4-0 to start the season. Should be 5-0.
If I'm not mistaken, they got a top 5, top 6 recruiting class next year.
Yeah, I think they finished pretty highly this past season too. So yeah, Larry Fedora kind of struggled. They've been the same since about 2013 to 2016. They were above 500 every year, bowl win every other year, somewhere in there. Then Larry Fedora kind of fell off, goes 5 and 18. Then Matt Brown hires in, tries to get that program over the bubble. I think he's the coach to do it. I was a big
Yep.
fan of that, and I'm pretty sure he's in North Carolina is his alma mater, or he's coached in North Carolina in the past. I can't remember which one it is. Let's see. He coached in North Carolina from '88 to '97, then went to Texas, and then came back to North Carolina. So I
Yep.
think he's definitely the guy to do it. I like the Les Miles hire at Kansas as well. I think Kansas is they're just so far down that it's going to take a while for Les to turn that one around.
Yeah.
Um, but you touched on a couple Tier 2 teams like Penn State, and I think this will be a good conversation for when we touch on the Big Ten, and it's kind of going to get me back to Gus Malzahn being on the hot seat. Um, so the Big Ten starts back this week. I have a couple topics that just kind of popped in my mind all of a sudden that I may talk about if I can remember. If not, oh well. Big Ten comes back this week. Game day is Minnesota and Penn State, I believe. Is that correct?
Uh,
Minnesota, Michigan. Sorry.
yeah. And
Yes.
Penn
So
State, Indiana. Yeah.
yeah. So Minnesota and Michigan play this week. Minnesota is one of those teams that's in the same situation as Miami, as North Carolina, as Texas A&M. Can they get over that bubble? So we'll start with the Big Ten and Minnesota and Michigan. What are you looking for with that game? How do you see that game playing out?
For me, if I'm Minnesota, I feel like every year it's the same thing with Michigan. You have a team that everyone thinks and they pass the eye test, they win all these games, but then they lose that second game that's just you're like, okay, so Jim Harbaugh can't do it again this year. So for me, if I'm Minnesota, I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, okay, Michigan, everybody buys into the hype at the beginning of the season, and Minnesota finished the season last year with a big win in the bowl game. So for me, I think Minnesota these are the games that you have to make a statement in. I think you need to win these games and you need to try to win them big because, they barely win this game and they lose a dump game. That's going to hurt their conversation. But if they win this game by 15, 16, 17 points and then, win and or lose a close one later in the season, I think that helps them. So I think this is a big game, big first game for them. Um, I don't really know too much about them. I don't know how many players they lost, but I know last year they're a pretty dang good team.
Yeah, I think this game right here defines their season. You look at their schedule. They start off with Michigan. You play Talia Tagovailoa, Mike Locksley, Maryland. You play Illinois. You play Iowa. I think Iowa's quarterback's out for the year too. It's either Iowa or Wisconsin. I can't remember which one exactly. Um, you play Purdue. You play Wisconsin, Northwestern, and Nebraska. To me, I'm looking at that schedule. Your toughest game is the first game of the year. Like I said, I think that's why this game will define your season. You start off
Yep.
rough. It's going to be uphill from there. But if you win it and win it in a good fashion, then you've set the bar for your season. And PJ Fleck is a good enough coach that can keep them at that bar or higher.
Yeah.
I don't think PJ Fleck is going to let them drop down to Maryland's level or to Illinois' level and lose a game like that. I think if
Mm-hmm.
they lose against Michigan, they lose against Wisconsin, they lose against Nebraska. So I think if you start this game off good, I think Rashad Bateman's going to go off. I have something that's telling me Rashad Bateman's going to play out of his mind against Michigan. Um, and then you have a 4-week cakewalk kind of. For growing pains for your younger guys. Then you play Wisconsin, Northwestern, and Nebraska. I think you could very easily find yourself in the Big Ten championship playing against Ohio State for the mere fact that you don't have to worry about playing them all season. So
Yeah.
that kind of calms your nerves down to where hey, if we take care of business, we'll get our shot at Ohio State and get our shot at the college football playoff.
Yeah, and looking at their schedule as well, I'm with you. I think this defines their season, and because you look at, I think they beat Maryland easily. I think they beat Illinois easily. Then you look at that 2-game stretch with Iowa and Purdue right before Wisconsin. Those 2 games right there are the games that typically Minnesota in recent years has been 5-6-0, 6-1, 7-1, whatever, and then they've lost a game like that. I think those 2 games right there in the schedule are going to be good, and they're going to say a lot about them, especially if they get the win this week. But looking at those 2 games before Wisconsin, I'm with you. I think if they win this week, we could see them in the Big Ten championship.
Yeah, and someone who or another team who we think has a good chance at having a good season, but it's also kind of like the complete opposite, is Nebraska, where they play Ohio State to start the year. They play Wisconsin right after that, and then you get Northwestern, then you get Penn State, and then you get Illinois, Iowa, Rondell Moore, and Purdue, and then Minnesota to finish the year. So
Yeah.
Nebraska has 8 games, and 4 of those are against top 15 teams.
Yeah.
So Nebraska, I think if you're looking at having a good season, you're going to have to start off hot. I think if you come off slow against Ohio State, you're going to come off slow against Wisconsin. Then you're sitting at 0-2. You pick up a win against Northwestern, but then you're right back into it playing against Penn State, who's going to be a good
Yeah.
team too. So I think the Big Ten could be the conference to watch this year compared to the ACC. ACC is not going to be any fun to watch. Big 12 is not going to be any fun to watch. SEC will be interesting, and then the Big Ten. I'm excited to watch Big Ten this year. Rashad Bateman, Rondell Moore. I think Adrian Martinez will be a good quarterback if he cannot turn the ball over. I'm not sure who Penn State has. I wish it was Trace McSorley still. But nonetheless, I think James Franklin's going to have them ready to go. They're the team that, just like North Carolina, Minnesota, they're that tier 2 team who is one good season away from getting over that bubble and being, the Ohio State of the Big Ten.
Penn State, and you look at Penn State's schedule too. It's not as tough as Nebraska's, but week 1, Indiana should be a win. You're at Ohio State, which will presumably, I think, be game day next Saturday. Then you got Maryland, Nebraska, Iowa, should be wins. Then Michigan, and then finish the season with Rutgers and Michigan State. So those they can afford to lose, but it has to be to Ohio State. I think anything after the Ohio State game, especially if it's a loss, is going to put them out of the conversation. But Penn State is one of those teams, we could see them losing to Ohio State, not making the Big Ten championship, and still getting in. So
Yeah,
just because of how crazy the year's been already.
Right. Yeah, to me, Penn State's just like Auburn, where you see them finish 8-4, 9-3, somewhere in there, and you think, oh, well, that's a mediocre season. To me, it's a lot worse than it actually is because 3 of those wins you pick up every year in non-conference, and then you're losing the games that matter. You're losing to Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio State,
Yeah.
maybe Iowa or somebody who has that good year every once in a while. So yeah, man, I think Penn State goes hand in hand with Auburn, with North Carolina. I think you have to have that one season that kind of solidifies it. Like, okay, this is the standard, and then if you can't meet that standard every year, then it's a bad season. But then, well, how do you feel about Michigan? Where do you think they fit in? Do you think they fit in with a tier 1 of Ohio State, or would you say they're more bubble team with Penn State and Wisconsin?
Yeah, I consider them a team like an outside tier 2 team, like a Texas A&M team that remains top 25 the remainder, if not the whole year. But for me, they're playing in the East of the Big Ten, and that's Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State, and then Maryland is always an up and down team. So definitely got the harder side of the conference. I don't think Michigan, and I think they lose probably 2-3 games this year. Let me check out their schedule right quick.
Talking about Michigan.
Yeah.
Yeah, Michigan, they play 4 top 25 teams. They play Minnesota,
Yeah.
Wisconsin, Penn State, Ohio State. So, in my opinion,
the last 3 games are going to be tough.
Yeah, definitely. I'm expecting Mike Locksley to turn Maryland around at some point. I don't think they fit in the Big Ten. Or sorry, the Big Ten. I think they should make that swap back to the ACC, slip Notre Dame into the Big Ten, and let that be their. That's how I think the conferences should be shaped.
Geographically, it should be.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the same time, Penn State geographically shouldn't be in the Big Ten, but I don't feel like Penn State is a ACC or Big East.
Yeah,
or
they fit the Big Ten.
Exactly, yeah. So geography-wise, they shouldn't be there, but team-wise, they should.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think one of these years, Harbaugh can obviously recruit, and I think that's one of the main reasons why Michigan has been a top tier team in the country year in and year out. I think he's one season away from going 9-3, 8-4, having a Gus Malzahn year where he just gets the boot because he's unable to perform. Like, I think he's going to go 8-4 one year. Well, I mean, it could be this year, but this year is a shortened schedule. He's going to go 9-3, 8-4 one year, but all 4 losses are going to be to the top teams in the Big Ten, and then the Michigan AD is going to be like, all right, well, he obviously can't get it done, so we got to get somebody else in here that can.
Yeah.
So this is what I was going to touch on earlier. He gets the boot just out of performance, on par with Gus Malzahn getting the boot out of performance. I could see PJ Fleck leaving Minnesota and taking the Auburn job.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good fit for him. You see like Mike Locksley left or came from Alabama, went to Maryland. Um, Josh Gaddis came from Michigan, went to Alabama. I can't remember where he's at now. He may have went from Alabama to Michigan. He came from Penn State to Alabama to Michigan. Coaches like that, not the best fit, but I can see it. PJ Fleck is one of those. PJ Fleck at Auburn is one of those where that makes total sense, and I'm kind of hoping that will happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he especially you look at that in the next coming years. You got to have if you're wanting to coach in the ACC or the SEC, you got to keep in mind. Okay, well Nick Saban is probably going to retire when his contract runs out in 25. So you come into the Auburn program in 2021-22, you got 3 years ago against Nick Saban. Then it's everybody's game. I think everybody's ball. Uh, not to say it couldn't be that way now, but it's just hard and appears harder for teams to beat Alabama within the SEC. But yeah, I'm with you. You want to get somebody that's not really affiliated with the SEC, in my opinion. You want somebody new from the outside, brings in a new atmosphere, new charisma for the team, everything to that nature. Not somebody that's straight off of Alabama's roster or LSU's roster or coaching staff. Pardon me. You definitely want to get somebody from the outside. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's kind of look at the Mike Leach situation. Mike Leach is a legendary coach. No idea what goes on in the SEC. You bring him in. I wouldn't imagine Mississippi State being the ideal fit for him. I could see him going more to like Kentucky, South Carolina. But I think he's in a decent position to where, like you said, I mean, Saban's only going to coach for so long. So when you look at these younger coaches that I think if you can find them in a scenario where they can have long-term success, maybe like a Mac Brown situation where you come into a mediocre program and then you kind of turn it up to where it's contending every year in the ACC or the SEC rather in this situation, I think those are the coaches that are going to have more success than the guys that are going to a Big Ten school who's going to be relevant for a few years, but they're not going to be a true contender.
Right.
I'm a big fan of PJ Fleck, but I don't see Minnesota ever topping Ryan Day or Harbaugh as long as he's there. Wisconsin's good year in and year out. James Franklin is good year in and year out. I just don't see PJ Fleck being there. I think Minnesota's going to be good, but I think they're just like Michigan is going to be where they'll never win the Big Ten. I just think they're going to be a good team that remains relevant in the Big Ten. So I kind of hope PJ Fleck gets out, but I don't want him to get out for a job less than Minnesota. Like if the Auburn job opens up, take it. Maybe like a Texas job opens up, take it. But if otherwise, stay at Minnesota and have good seasons where you look like a really good coach losing to elite teams. So.
And he would definitely, if he were to be the coach at Auburn, he would have more of what's like a wider range of recruiting. Like more people would be more interested in coming to Auburn than they would Minnesota, in my opinion. Same thing being with Texas or Oklahoma or any school like that, they're going to want that when you see the letters pop in. If you get one from Auburn, you get one from Minnesota, you're going to be like, oh, Auburn football, SEC. So I think that that'll help his recruiting because he's already a good enough coach. He's proved himself to be worthy of a role like that. So I think that would definitely help out.
Yeah, I agree. I know you're probably the complete opposite of me, but if I get a letter from PJ Fleck at Minnesota or PJ Fleck to Auburn, I'm going to Auburn just for the fact that I don't want to go to Minnesota to play football. Or
Yeah.
like I don't want to go to the state of Minnesota in the Big Ten to play football. I'd much rather go down south in the SEC. But
Yeah.
that's just me. I think you're probably the opposite of that, I'd imagine.
Oh no. I mean, personality wise, I prefer the cold, but
Yeah,
if I was going to be playing football for four
right.
years, I would rather play in the South or the
I got you.
West.
Yeah, I feel that. Um, but yeah, so we'll go off the Big Ten and come back to it in a little bit when we do the picks, and we'll get into our top 10 teams in the country right now. We'll start with top 10 and work our way up towards the top four because by the time we get there, then we get into the college football playoff
Yep.
conversation. So to start off, I'll give you my 10 through 6, and this may honestly be 11 through 6. I haven't wrote down. I don't have them numbered. Um, Coming in at number 10, I have Florida. Um, Good team. Not sure, what their ceiling is. Still a couple games this season that I'm looking forward to watching them play. Um, and I think they have potential to finish top 6 bubble of the playoff. Just kind of depends on how it pans out. After them, I have Cincinnati and BYU. You can kind of throw wherever. Both really good teams. They're just not in respected conference. BYU is obviously an independent. Cincinnati not in the conference that's going to get them into the playoff, but I still think they're really, really good teams who could beat the likes of Auburn and Virginia Tech and Boston College and teams like that if they were
Mm-hmm.
given the chance to play them. After that, I've got OK State, who is sitting at 4-0, I believe. Check that really quick. 3-0, sorry.
3-0. Yeah.
Yeah.
3-0.
So then you get Penn State after them. See them play for the first time on Saturday. And then I have Notre Dame coming in at number 5, where, kind of like we touched on earlier, not exactly sure if they're legit or not. They passed the eye test, but they still haven't been challenged all season. So excited to see them go up against Clemson in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. My 10 team, I got it right here. I got a tie. I got BYU and Cincinnati, two teams. BYU's clearly they're winning games. Same thing with Cincinnati, but are they good enough to compete with the top 8, top 9 teams of the country? I don't know. So for the benefit of the record and offensive performance for the majority of the games, that's why I have them tied 9-10 right now. Number 8 team is going to be Texas A&M. I think losing to Alabama, they put up a decent amount of points. I think that kind of helped them, especially coming in the next week and then beating Florida, who I have right ahead of Texas A&M. I don't think after watching them lose to Texas A&M, I think Florida can struggle. I can definitely see them struggling the rest of the year. Excuse me. But as far as being better than Texas A&M, I still think they're kind of the same. I think they're both going to lose one more game this year. I think Florida's going to lose to Georgia, but Texas A&M, they could win out. I could also see them losing to somebody like Auburn or a team they just relax on. If that makes sense. And then 6-7 spot, I've got Oklahoma State and Penn State. Haven't seen Penn State play, but I imagine they're going to finish the year top 15, top 16 team. As of now, they're top ranked for a reason. Had a good season last year. So that's why they're sitting where they are. And then at my number 5, I have Notre Dame, and I still have Georgia at 4. And that'll get us into the playoffs, or who, so far, who we think is in the playoff. I've got, no, in particularly no order. I've got Clemson, Bama, Georgia, and Ohio State.
Yeah, that's exactly the four I have. And I think, you know, I love the playoffs so much more because it leads to way more conversation than the BCS did. Where the BCS is kind of like, all right, this guy's number one, this guy's number two, throw him in there, let him at it. With the playoff, it's you could have a case where three or four teams could be that number four team in the country because it's not on paper this team's a number four. It's all right, this team plays and deserves to be the number four team in the country.
Yeah,
Um, but then you get into the situation where it's like, all right, well, Clemson's the number one team in the country. This team has no shot at beating Clemson in the playoffs, so why would we put them in there? Or they've already played Clemson once. Why should we throw them in there at the number four where they're just going to lose again?
yeah,
And this is something I was thinking about earlier, to where Alabama and Georgia square off again in the college football playoff. We'll say Clemson loses to North Carolina in the ACC championship. So you have Alabama, who's at number one, Clemson's at number two. We'll say Ohio State's number three, and then you have a two-loss Georgia team. You have North Carolina, who just beat Clemson. Who would you put in at that number four, where you're like, all right, well, if we put in Georgia, they're playing Alabama, who they've lost to twice already. Do we think we should put them up against that team again, or would you put in, North Carolina, who lost to Florida State, but beat Clemson, essentially the same week that second loss at Georgia came to Alabama.
yeah.
Um, in my opinion, I would think you would kind of be dumb to not go with Georgia if they play close in the SEC championship, lose by 3 or 4 points or something.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that comes to an interesting conversation or an interesting decision that you would have to make being a voter, where you're like, do we put in a two-loss Georgia team over a one-loss North Carolina, even though Georgia, eye test, on paper, whatever, is clearly the better team? What do you think?
How I think it will go versus how I believe it should go, two totally different things. I think that if Georgia loses to Alabama in the SEC championship, given that they went out and they both play each other, I think two losses for me would put them out. I can see what you're saying in terms of, you know, they may be the better team if it were, like you said, North Carolina. But then that's when I think you would have to look at, okay, if Oklahoma State, loses one game, but they went out and win the Big 12, that would be my number four team. Um,
Yeah, I was going to throw them into the mix too. Is if OK State runs the table, then you have three
yeah,
teams who are essentially on the same playing field. So
I just between Clemson, Notre Dame, and North Carolina, though, one if not two of those three teams, from schedule perspective, they could two of those three teams could be knocked out of the four just from all playing each other, but still could be a better team than maybe Georgia, better team than Oklahoma State. Have they win out or lose one and win the Big 12? It's going to be real confusing. It's confusing right now to try to think about the different scenarios, but I think it's safe to say Clemson and Alabama are your top two locks right now, unless they shit away a game or something. Those two teams for me would be top two locks. Now three through the whole remainder of the teams ranked in college football, it's kind of just up in the air. Um, I think if Georgia and Alabama were to play again and Georgia won, I think it would make it easier to say, okay, Alabama's already beat them once, won the rest of their games, beat Texas A&M, who's probably going to finish a top 12, top 14 team. Uh, we could see them getting in the fourth spot, but it's confusing. It really is.
yeah, I think Clemson, Alabama, as long as they don't have a loss in the regular season, I think they could both lose the conference championship and still be in without question, because you're looking at who are they going to play in the conference championship is a team that
Mm-hmm.
you are considering putting in anyway. You're going to play Georgia, who's one loss. Um, you're going to play Notre Dame or North Carolina, or well, I guess one of those teams would have to be two losses if I threw Miami
Yep.
in there. But you're looking at Notre Dame, North Carolina, and or Miami, who are all one-loss teams, and you're like, well, you were making a case for those at number four. So even though they beat Clemson, Clemson's in. But now it's like, well, it just makes it harder to decide who goes in at number 4. So with it being this early in the season, Big Ten hasn't played a game yet. Pac-12 we're not even considering because I don't know why we would. It's gonna lead to a lot of conversation. I feel like we're gonna do one of these episodes, especially after the conference championship, like on Sunday. I would love for Saturday night, the 19th, or Sunday morning of the 20th, us get up and put out an episode before the show, which we'd have to do it early, and then maybe do like a prediction versus a reaction, or both. But yeah, I think as the season goes on, it's gonna lead to really good conversation. So obviously, we could go all day on why this team deserves to be in, but I'll ask you this, and then we'll get into picks for the week. Who would you say is the conference that has the best chance to get 2 teams in the playoffs?
Right now, I think it has to be the ACC. You could argue the SEC with Alabama, and then you say Florida, they beat Georgia later on, make it to the SEC championship. They would have to win, whereas a team like Notre Dame could lose one game in the regular season and maybe beat Clemson, or North Carolina can win out, and beat Clemson in the ACC championship. I think in terms of path to the playoff, I think ACC has the better advantage of having 2 teams in, just in terms of who they have to play week in, week out, and how the schedules are aligned. But for the SEC, I think they do have the better teams right now overall. Texas A&M, Georgia, Florida, Bama, of course. But all those teams right there are going to have to play each other, and 3 of those teams will have to play each other, vice versa. Alabama and Florida don't play, but they play Georgia and Texas A&M, and they've won both of those games. So I think the ACC has the easiest path to getting 2 teams in.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think in terms of who would be the better opponent to throw in the playoffs, I would say the second ACC team would be. But I think if you have to break it down to who can be which conference, to answer my question, which conference has the best chance of getting 2 teams in, I think it has to be the Big Ten, because you could have a scenario where both teams in the conference championship are undefeated. You have Wisconsin, Minnesota, I'll throw in Nebraska, who could finish that season undefeated. And then on the other side, you have Ohio State and Penn State, who could finish that season undefeated. So for that reason, I would say, because you're looking at, unless Alabama or Clemson lose, you're looking at a 2-loss SEC runner-up, a 2-loss ACC runner-up, and then a potential 1-loss Big Ten runner-up. So I think for that reason, you're looking at the Big Ten runner-up's only loss being to the Big Ten champion. Now, we're saying where the 2-loss Georgia team could be their only losses are to Alabama, or a scenario where Notre Dame's only 2 losses are to the ACC champion. Nonetheless, I think for the reason that you could have both sides of the Big Ten Conference go undefeated, make it to the championship undefeated, I think for that reason they would have the upper hand in getting 2 teams into the playoffs.
Yep, I can definitely see that.
All right, so we've touched on. You want to do some Heisman's this week, or are we just going to keep it the same where it's kind of still the same for this?
It'll be easier to talk about next week.
Yeah.
I think right now it's a Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones race.
Yeah, I've got Trevor, Mac Jones, and Zach Wilson, just because they're 1, 2, 3 in grades. Zach Wilson doesn't look as good because it's BYU, but I believe he's a sophomore as well. So I mean, he's playing really, really well to be graded, because you can look at BYU's not performing well as a team, but Zach Wilson is performing well as an individual player, and I think that's why you have to throw him into the conversation. Something I saw on Mac Jones earlier today before we get into picks. The national average for passes thrown outside the hash marks, at least 20 yards downfield, is a completion percent of 32.9%. So 33% outside the hash marks over 20 yards downfield. Average 14.3 yards per attempt, okay? Mac Jones, 11 for 13. That's 85% for 40.31 yards per attempt with 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, I think that has a lot to say about his receivers getting open as well. But
Oh yeah,
ball
yeah,
placement is key, and he's proved himself to be one of the best at it. And like we were saying earlier, his decision making. He's making excellent decisions, which you would ask for in a quarterback. I think I'm a little biased because I am an Alabama fan, but I think anybody that knows football knows how the quarterback position works, knows how offenses work. You can see that Mac Jones and his decision making is top of the country, top notch right now. Best, probably one of the best we've seen in recent years.
yeah. I think even if we do have a little bit of bias towards Alabama and towards Mac Jones, if you straight up just watch um, Mac Jones play football, I mean, there's no doubt that you're going to be like, all right, this kid can sling it, this kid can play. He don't force throws, he don't turn the ball over. He is a good quarterback. Um,
Yep.
but yeah, so nonetheless, we'll get into college football. Or sorry, the picks for this week because Heisman, like you said, it'll be a good thing to touch on next week when we throw Justin Fields and some others into the mix. So we'll start off with you want to start off with the Big Ten, or
Yeah,
since we haven't talked
yeah, that
about them
works.
all season. Um, so we'll go with the game on Friday night first. Illinois at Wisconsin. Wisconsin probably going to win that one pretty handily up at Camp Randall. Uh, what do you think?
Yeah, I think they win. 1-2 scores. I think we see. I think there's going to be a lot of sloppiness this week across the Big Ten. I think we'll have one or two teams come out and absolutely look golden. But other than that, I think it's a sloppy weekend for Big Ten football. Um, so in a game of sloppiness out of these two teams, I'm definitely taking Wisconsin.
Yeah, I can agree the Big Ten is going to be interesting this week. And this will get me into the next game would be Nebraska and Ohio State. I can see this going either way, which
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously you could see a game being a blowout, you could see the game being close, but this one really has that potential because you don't know how Nebraska is going to come out. Ohio State could come out very, very flat. They could be where
Yeah,
at the end of the game we're like, wow, is this team even a top 5 team? Is it a top 10 team? Should we even consider them to be the Big Ten champions? Um, Nebraska, Scott Frost, I throw him into that PJ Fleck category. That's a up and comer coach. I think he's going to have Nebraska ready to go. I mean, hell, they were ready to join the SEC and go a month ago. So I think that's going to be the game to watch more so than Minnesota and Michigan, just for talent wise. Minnesota and Michigan has the hype because it's number 18 versus number 21. But to me, I see Ohio State taking it over Nebraska. But I'm more excited to watch that game than I am to watch Michigan and Minnesota on Saturday night.
yeah, I'm with you. I'm super excited to watch Ohio State and Nebraska for our good buddy Cade Powell. One thing I was looking at here, the last three games that Ohio State's lost over the last 3 years, um, teams have been up 11 or more points in those games at one point in the game. So I think for Nebraska to win this game, they need to get up 2 scores. I think Nebraska's coached well enough to handle that lead, say they were to get it. So for me, if Nebraska's going to win this game, they need to get up early, and don't sit on it. But overall, I don't think it's going to happen that way. I think Ohio State wins, and I think it's a close one.
Yeah, I agree. I think Ohio State's only losses the last couple of years that have put them out of the playoffs, not counting the playoff losses, have been a bad loss to Purdue and a 30-something point loss to Iowa.
Yeah.
So they're kind of the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers' last 5 losses have been blowouts. So Ohio State's kind of the same way. So next we'll get to Rutgers and Michigan at Michigan State. Um, do you know Todd Woodruff is a videographer for Michigan State now?
Do what?
Todd Woodruff from Abbeville is a videographer for Michigan State now.
It seems like a dream job.
Oh yeah, yeah. He's talked to me a little bit about it and what he does and what he makes and everything, and it's not a bad gig. I'm a little jealous of it. But who you got taking that one? Rutgers at Michigan State.
Just based off of history of Rutgers, they've been at the bottom of the poll for the last several years. So I'm thinking Michigan State wins this one. I think this is one of those games that I said there'll be one or two teams come out and look golden. I think Michigan State is that team. They're got them highlighted. I think they come out and they're going to look like a different team. To come out and not be ranked to start the season. I think it's the first time in 5 years that's happened. So I think Michigan State's always a team that's competed. They've won big games. They've given ESPN a good show over the last few years in a couple games. So I think Michigan State's one of those teams you can't sleep on. I think they will win a couple big games this year in the Big Ten. So I think they're one of those teams that come out and just handle business with ease.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see Rutgers um, getting away from the bottom of the barrel in the Big Ten anytime soon. I think they're kind of stuck in that situation with Maryland, where if they were in another conference, we're talking about a completely different team. But with them being in the Big Ten, I don't see it. Don't see it
Yeah.
going in their favor. I think Michigan State's going to win that one pretty decently, and the same thing's going to go for Penn State at Indiana in Bloomington. Penn State top 10 team to start the season. I think James Franklin's going to have them ready to go. I think they're playing with a little bit of chip on their shoulder, and I know that if they took this week easy, if they slacked off, they got Ohio State next week, and if they don't come out looking great, then Ohio State's going to run all over them, and I think James Franklin's going to use that as motivation, and I got Penn State winning that one pretty handily.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Penn State wins it by a couple scores. I think it's kind of close early, maybe through halftime. For the sole fact of in the last 5 years, Indiana's finished the season with a top five defense in the Big Ten, and Penn State has finished with a top five worst offense. So I think for Indiana to even have slightly a chance, they have to be on their defensive game. I don't think they're going to outscore Penn State. So it's definitely going to have to be a defensive win for them if they have any shot of winning at all. And I don't think they do. I think Penn State is going to win this one pretty easy.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into the game of the week for college football, according to College Game Day, we'll touch on Purdue and Iowa. I think, I mentioned earlier, I think Rashad Bateman's going to have another big day. I think Rondell Moore is going to have the game on Saturday. I believe he missed all of last season. I did a video on both of these guys, Rashad and Rondell Moore, about 2 weeks ago, where I touched on their stats in 2018. And I think they both got hurt last year and came back this year. So I'm excited to see Rondell Moore play one of the most electrifying wide receivers in the NCAA. I got Purdue. I don't know if it would be upsetting. I don't know who's the favorite to win that game, but I do have Purdue taking it over Iowa. So yeah, so technically that one would be an upset. Iowa is the favorite to win that, but I could see Purdue pulling off upset in this one.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think playmakers coming back on the Purdue side of things. I think that plays a key role in this game. Iowa's one of those teams within the Big Ten. I think they're a tier 2 bubble team. That they've had years where they've been top 15, top 10, top 25, but recently they haven't. And Purdue, they're known to go on a hot streak. They can do that. It shows last year and the year before. I think they win this one. I think they win it. I don't want to say big, but I don't want to say smaller. I think they win it in just reasonably fashion.
Yeah, Jeff Brom, their head coach, has actually tested positive for COVID and won't be there. But I think that doesn't really factor into the conversation. I do see Purdue winning that one. What about Maryland at Northwestern? That'll probably be one of the more interesting games of the game, or interesting games of the day, just for the fact that neither team is really that great. How do you see that one playing out?
I think that's one of those games that, like I said, there's going to be sloppiness across the conference. I think that's one of those games that's just going to be who's going to win the turnover ratio and get points off of turnovers. I think we see maybe a fumble or two, interception or two for both teams. Haven't really watched much, or kept up with much throughout their camps or anything, so I don't know, who's the standouts for each team going into it. But I do know that from last year and the year before, they are at the bottom of the Big Ten in terms of offense. So I think that's one of those games we see a lot of sloppiness. But who's going to win? I really don't know. I think I'm going to take Maryland just because.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Maryland too. Josh Jackson, their returning quarterback from last year, didn't put up great stats. He has, let's see, last year he was 98 for 207, 12 touchdowns, 6 picks. Um, Awful, technically, when you look at it. I mean, you
Yeah.
threw the ball over 200 times and had a 47% completion percentage, 12 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. That's not good at all. Um, but nonetheless, he is coming back, and he's not on a great team. I mean, Maryland's not good at all. Um, I'm gonna go with Maryland winning this just because Northwestern. I don't really know what you're getting with them. I think
Yeah.
Mike Loxley in his second season may have something up his sleeve. So it won't be a pretty game, but I do have Maryland taking this one.
Yep.
So we'll get into the SEC. I'm gonna pull up the schedule.
Michigan, Minnesota.
Oh yeah, sorry. So I thought we already touched on that one, but I guess not. Michigan,
Kind of
Minnesota.
have. We just
Yeah,
hadn't made our prediction.
yeah. So we've talked about it. I think this is going to be one of those years that I kind of touched on earlier where Jim Harbaugh and Michigan doesn't have a good year. I think they're going to start off very slow. They didn't play too great against Alabama in the bowl game, and they haven't played in 8.5 months, which I guess, obviously Minnesota hasn't either, but I think PJ Fleck is just a different breed of a coach. I'm a big fan of PJ.
Hmm.
I'm going to row the boat, and I've got Minnesota winning over Michigan in the upset.
Yeah, I've got Michigan or Minnesota beating Michigan as well. I think it's one of those games that comes down to like the final 5-6 minutes. Who can put up a touchdown or get a defensive stop right there at the end. I think it's going to be one of those games. I think this is one of those games too that we see a team come out and look good. I think either way, I think it's going to be close, but I think we see a team. Does Jim Harbaugh have Michigan and company ready? Who knows? PJ Fleck, Minnesota. Who knows? Both coaches are great. I think either one of these teams could come out and look as good as they should look, as good as they could look. So, with that being said, I think I'm going to go with Minnesota. With you, I think Michigan has a down year.
Yeah, I think we both can agree with that one. So now we will hop over to the SEC. Um, Auburn and Ole Miss to start off. Uh, I don't think Auburn's going to turn it around just yet. I think Ole Miss was upset last week against Arkansas. That kind of, I don't want to say like took them by surprise. I feel like that was a game that could go either way, but I feel like that kind of shocked Ole Miss to where it's like, okay, we thought we were better than this. Auburn's getting by the skin of their teeth. Shouldn't have won against Arkansas. Lost to South Carolina. I don't think they turn it around this week. I'm on the Lane train. I've got Ole Miss defeating Auburn by about 10. I'm going with 10 to 14, like 41-27, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think there's a lot riding on this game for Auburn, especially. I think Ole Miss, like you said last week, I'm not real sure about that loss, especially how they looked against Alabama. Maybe that is the true Ole Miss colors. They just played their best game against Bama. But for that fact, I think Auburn has a lot riding on this game, especially in coaching aspects of it. I think Auburn wins this one. Um, Taking Auburn in a close one. I probably won't pick them in our little
And the pick 'em where it matters.
yeah. I probably won't pick them in that, but I can see Auburn win this game. I've just got my head wrapped around it that I think Auburn can win, but I'm still not going to pick them in our pick 'em. But just because Ole Miss could easily come out and throw for 500 yards, but I don't think that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just don't see Auburn being able to put up enough points offensively. I think if you feed Tank Bigsby and let him carry you, then you're looking at, having a good chance to win. I just don't see that happening. I'm going to go with Ole Miss just basically outscoring Auburn. Um, it'll be a really fun game. Alabama and Tennessee. I think we both kind of predicted it earlier. Alabama should win that one very handedly. We'll say this. I think we both agree Alabama's going to win. Spread over under 10.
Are you asking what I think?
Yeah, you think Alabama wins by more or less than 10 points?
Oh, I definitely think they win by more. Um, watching Tennessee the last 2 weeks, they really have looked super sloppy. I don't think Alabama's a team that you can look even the remotely slightest way possible. You can't play sloppy if you want to win that game. I don't think they're going to do it. I think they play good for one quarter. And after that, I think Alabama wins probably by about 20, 25 points.
Yeah, Alabama's a 21.5-point favorite. The only thing Tennessee has going for them in this game is it's at home. It's in Neyland Stadium, which I would love to go to. Have you ever been to Neyland? I know we've been by it.
No, I never have been.
Yeah, that's on my list of stadiums I would love to tour in the next 5 years. Kentucky at Missouri. Kentucky, I believe they picked up a dominant win last week against Tennessee.
Yeah.
They've allowed 4.5 points per game over the last two. They lost to Mississippi State where they were outscored by 1 point. And then they lost to Auburn to start the year. So Missouri's not a bad team. Kind of young, I believe. Had a rough start where they played Alabama. Then they pick up a win over LSU. And then, of course, they lose to Tennessee as well. Didn't play last week due to COVID, but I still don't see them kind of pulling out over Kentucky. I think Missouri is one of those teams that's on the come up, but I don't think they have enough in them to upset the Wildcats this week.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think Kentucky's, coming off a big win last week, especially defensively. I think we see a more defensive dominant game from Kentucky again this week. I think that's definitely their strong suit so far. I think they should have won, opening week against Auburn. So don't let their record reflect on how good of a team, Kentucky is. I think they win this one. I think it's close, though.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be closer than other people would imagine. I'll check the spread real quick. Kentucky is 5.5 points favorite. I'd be hesitant to take either one on that. I don't know that I'll take the over or the under on it because it's going to be right there around it. But that's why I don't bet on spreads. So we'll finish up in the SEC with South Carolina at LSU. South Carolina with a big win last week over Auburn. LSU had a bye week. I think I'm gonna go with the Gamecocks and Will Muschamp. I think eventually you're gonna see South Carolina pop off one year and win the SEC East. I don't think it's this year, but LSU just being down, they've got an extra week to prepare. But I think South Carolina coming off a really good performance will head down to Baton Rouge and take care of business against LSU.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm taking South Carolina in this one. I think, overall right now they have the better team. I don't know if they have better players, but they have the more complete team. It showed last week. I think LSU's going to put up points. They may even, be leading for the majority of the game. This is one of those games I could see going either way, but if I'm going to choose a team, I think South Carolina comes out victorious.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll be one of those 50, 60 point games total, but I don't think LSU just has it in them right now. I think they have the talent, but I think just from a team perspective right now, I don't see them winning. I touched on this game earlier, North Carolina and NC State, both teams ranked. I did mention NC State lost their quarterback. Do you think that's going to make a difference in the outcome of this game, or who are you rolling with?
I definitely think it hurts the chances for North Carolina State. They would have to play dang near perfect, I think, to win this game. And, like I said earlier, I think the Florida State loss for North Carolina was a fluke. So I'm going with North Carolina. I think they win this one pretty soundly. I think it's a statement game for the ACC. I think Sam Howell, he's going to keep being consistent, keep being good, like he has been. I think he throws for a couple touchdowns. And I think he's going to be my guy that has the biggest game. So I'm going to ride with him, ride with the quarterback in this one.
Yeah, I agree. Like you said, I think it is going to be a statement game. Coming off a really bad loss against Florida State, they'll win this one with NC State's quarterback out. Like you said, they'll have to play perfect. I would almost say that you could make a statement for NC State winning it should their quarterback be healthy and playing. But that's definitely not the case now. I think when you're looking at the North Carolina and Notre Dame matchup late November, North Carolina is going to be, let's see, 4, 5, 6, 7-1 for that matchup. I don't see them losing any time in the next 5 weeks, so I'm going to continue that prediction and take North Carolina over NC State. So next we have Iowa State at Oklahoma State. Iowa State, who had a pretty good win a couple weeks ago, but I will say they also had a eye-opening loss to where they lost to, I believe it is Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was considering putting UAB versus, I don't know if it's ULM or UL Lafayette. I was considering putting that game on here as a game to talk about, but I chose this one instead towards Iowa State at Oklahoma State. How do you see that one playing out?
The only way I see Iowa State winning this one is simply because Oklahoma State has been on a bye for 2 weeks, if I'm correct. They had the bye week scheduled, then they got postponement of Baylor game last week. I think they look sloppy, but I think they do enough right to win the game. I think they realize how much they have riding now that Texas and Oklahoma are not going to be in the conversation. I think they realize, hey, this is our chance, this is our year to win the Big 12, and I think that's in the back of their minds. So I think they win this week. I think it's real close. I think Iowa State has a couple big plays. Like I said, could go either way, but I'm riding with Oklahoma State.
Yeah, definitely going to be a closer game than I think what people are anticipating. 74% of people say Oklahoma State's going to win this game. Iowa State win over TCU, win over Oklahoma, win over Texas Tech. They have a pretty easy schedule here on out after this game. I think it's a statement game for Oklahoma State. I think their schedule is the complete opposite, where it gets nothing but tougher. You got Texas Tech, Texas, maybe Oklahoma. I believe they have to play later on in the season. So Oklahoma State, so you get Iowa State, then Texas, Kansas State, Oklahoma, Texas Tech, TCU. It's just going to get impossible
then they play
for
Baylor
Oklahoma State.
after that.
Yeah,
I think they rescheduled it.
Right.
So.
Finish the year with Baylor. It's just looking brutal for Oklahoma State. I don't see Oklahoma State running the table and going undefeated. Mm-hmm. I don't know which game they're going to lose, but I don't think it's this one. I'm going to ride with Iowa State in this one as well. Oklahoma State as well. And then the last game we can talk about, unless there's another one that you want to bring up, would be Cincinnati and SMU.
Yep.
Yeah. Shane Buechele has SMU at 5-0, ranked 16 in the country. They play Cincinnati, who are 3-0, ranked number 9 in the country. The quarterbacks, Shane Buechele has 1,700 yards already on the season. Not sure where that ranks nationally, but it's got to be up there. I believe that's more than Mac Jones, more than Trevor Lawrence. He's sitting at 12 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Ryder, I believe, for Cincinnati, it's Ridder. 597, 6 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. When you look at it, and I said this earlier when I was talking about my top 10, Cincinnati and BYU is kind of head-to-head. You could see them winning games against like South Carolina, Kentucky, Auburn, Georgia Tech, teams like that. Mm-hmm. But I think they are on upset alert this week. I could see SMU and Shane Buechele putting on a clinic. The over-under set for 57.5. I'm taking the over all day. I think this is going to be a very high-scoring game. You're looking at 80 to 90 points total. It's at SMU, and I'm going with SMU to win it. I honestly just made that decision right now because I've been debating it all day while looking at it. If Cincinnati wins, it's just going to help their case even more as to why they should be in the playoff, because they have a really good chance to finish undefeated. But I think Shane Buechele and Sonny Dykes are going to have SMU ready to go, and I see this being if Cincinnati is going to lose a game all year, I believe this one's it.
To be honest, I'm with you. I didn't make the decision right now. I thought about it earlier. I thought SMU could win this game. I think playing at home is going to play a big factor. But the only thing I disagree is I think this is going to be a relatively low score. And when I say low scoring for these teams, I'm talking upper 20s, low 20s, maybe even low 30s. I think SMU does win this game. I think they have a defensive game. I think this is going to be a game where they get a couple picks, maybe a fumble or a special teams touchdown, something to that nature. Their offense is definitely offensive team that we know can put up points, and I think for that fact in this game, I think they're not going to. I think this is going to be a defensive show, and I think SMU is going to win.
Yeah, I mean Cincinnati coming off a bye last week where they had a postponement. I think they're going to be ready to go. But you look at SMU, who has scored no less than 30 points per game. They've hung 50 twice and 60 once. So I think that that's the main reason why I got SMU winning a shootout. I would love to see it come down to defense, but it kind of, I said Cincinnati wins this. They kind of finish the season undefeated. I believe it's the same scenario for SMU. You got to keep a little asterisk on that Houston game for SMU. I'm not sure if Cincinnati has already played Houston. I don't believe they have.
Nope, they play them November 7th.
Yeah, so Cincinnati's got a tough 3 week skid with SMU included. They play Memphis next week, who has a really good offense, and then you play Houston after that. So Cincinnati, I think if they can make it through these 3 weeks unscathed, then they'll be pretty good. And then the same thing for SMU. Basically, whoever wins this one is going to win the American Conference. That's how I see this one winning out. So I'm really excited to see how this game finishes up on Saturday.
Yep.
Is there another game you want to touch on before we close it out, or any other game that you're looking forward to watching this weekend?
To be honest, I hadn't even looked at the slate for all the games. See if I can pull it up.
Let's see. We got UAB at Louisiana, which I touched on. That one's a wish-wash. I don't really know who to pick in that one. Haven't researched it a lot. Jacksonville State at Florida International. I don't see Jacksonville State winning that one. I love JSU. I just don't see them pulling that one out. I think then they finish it. They have Mercer next weekend. I wish that was in Jacksonville. I'd probably go to it. Mercer plays Army. That may be a really good game.
Yeah.
Liberty plays Southern Miss.
Baylor, Texas.
Yeah.
That'd be decent.
You think that one's low scoring, or would that be another shootout?
I think it's gonna be a shootout. I haven't watched Baylor enough, but I know that Texas defense is not top tier. So I think we could see a high scoring game in that one. Other than that, I don't know. I think BYU is easily gonna win. Texas State. I don't see any other games that just kind of catch my eye.
Yeah, I don't really see any either. But I will say one team in general that's kind of kept my eye would be Liberty and Hugh Freeze.
Yeah.
They're 5-0. They beat Florida International by 2. They beat UNA by 21. Beat ULM by 33, and then beat Syracuse by 17 last week. They have Virginia Tech, Western Carolina, NC State, and Coastal Carolina to finish the year after Southern Miss on this weekend. I see them beating Southern Miss. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they finish this year. Let's see, what would it be? 9-1, beating 2 top 25 teams. I think Hugh Freeze has got that program in a good situation. They're independent. I would like to see them get thrown in like the American Conference or something, maybe Conference USA with UAB. But nonetheless, I think Liberty is a team to watch out for the rest of the season. I don't think they're college football playoff material, but I do think they could finish this season really good, 9-1, 10-0, somewhere in there.
Yeah. And I had saw something last week. It was a tweet talking about Liberty and their win over Syracuse. It was the first for something for the school. I don't know if it was against, I don't want to say ACC. Maybe it is ACC, first ACC win. I don't know, but
that would make sense.
It was something along the lines of it was the school's, the football program's first something in school history. So if y'all see that, be sure to let us know. I know it was pretty impressive, whatever it was, because I was like, this team's 5-0. Wow.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Lots of good teams out there. Very excited to see how this one plans out. I've been keeping a lot of eyes on Conference USA, on the American Conference, on independents with Liberty and BYU. May have to start giving more attention to those teams. The group of 5, even though they're not Power 5, they're not going to get all the national spotlight. There's still a lot of decent teams. especially in the state of Alabama. I don't know if you saw this. I did some research and put this one out. Every team in Alabama besides UNA, because UNA played Jacksonville State, won on Saturday except for Auburn. So
Yeah.
don't count North Alabama or Jacksonville State for that matter, because it was an in-state game. So every team in Alabama that didn't play an in-state game won except for Auburn. So Alabama seems to know what we're doing with football, at least the state does. So
Yeah.
UAB's won some conference championships with Bill Clark, Jacksonville State with John Gross, Troy down there. I think they just got a new coach like 2 years ago, did they not?
Yeah. I think it was 2, maybe 3.
Yeah, redid their stadium. Veterans Memorial Stadium looks really good.
Top 25 team last year.
Yeah, beat
for part of the
LSU
season.
2 years ago. Beat LSU two
Yeah.
years ago in Baton Rouge. So I'm ready for 2021. Maybe me and you can get traveling to some of these games, do some live shows for sure. But yeah, so I'll finish with this. If there's any team out there that you are a fan of or think that we should give more attention to or should cover, let us know. We're all about conversation. Obviously we're here to talk football, and we'll talk football all day. If we don't know the topic, we'll research the topic and make sure we get out the best content for you guys that we can. Anything else you want to talk about before we close?
No, I'm excited. I'm glad the Big Ten's back.
Yeah,
it's gonna be good football Saturday. I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Got college football on Saturday, 7 hours commercial free football on Sunday, Sunday night game, Monday night game. Not sure how the NFL pans out this week. We'll have to look at that and then get a podcast out on that later this week. But yeah, guys, that's going to do it for episode 6, week 8 coverage of college football. Appreciate you guys tuning in for sure. If there's anything, like I mentioned a minute ago, that you want us to touch on or bring attention to, let us know. You can reach out to us on Twitter, on Facebook. You can leave a comment, or you can find us on TikTok. There's a lot of stuff I put out on TikTok, and Matthew's working on some other stuff to put out that we don't cover in the podcast or anything, or if we don't do a certain video on it, then we include that on TikTok, and if we don't talk about it on the podcast, for instance, Rashad Bateman and Rondell Moore both announcing that they were coming back this year. We put out a separate video on that a couple weeks ago that you guys can tune into on our YouTube channel. So be sure to subscribe and follow us on all social media so you are up to date with what's going on. Hopefully this time next week, maybe, we might have our apparel that you guys can purchase now. It's available in the description below. Going to throw up a graphic that has a couple designs on it once I close this out. But yeah, we both have shirts on the way as soon as they get here. I'll throw mine on for the camera. Might get a picture of Matthew in his and throw that for his picture opposed to a player 1 week. But we will see how this thing goes. Matt, episode 6 in the books. Really enjoying it with you. Got lots of things in the works still, like we've talked about, doing live shows and interviews and things like that. So whatever you guys want to see from us, just let us know, and we'll do our best to cover it.
Yeah. And another thing, if you guys, if you're listening and your team, your favorite team, you don't have, your colors on a shirt or anything, shoot the idea to us. We'll try to get on a t-shirt if you want one. But Gage, good as usual, brother. I've enjoyed it. Looking forward to next week for sure after the Big Ten kicks off. It'll make conversations a lot, more clear on who stands where and what players stand where. So looking forward to it, man.
Yep, always a good time. Like I said, just be sure to follow us on social media, guys. We have lots of good stuff coming. We appreciate your support so far. I think we're up to almost 20 subscribers. We're looking at doing a giveaway sometime around the holidays, something kind of big. Not sure exactly what it's going to be. So be sure to subscribe, and you'll automatically be entered into that giveaway. If you stuck with us this far, we really appreciate it. That's going to do it for week 6, and we will catch you guys next week.